family, Paige and Brennan, Gail, sister-in-law, Kathy, sister here, Nancy, who couldn't make it, and for Linda and her family. We appreciate you being here. I'd also like to thank all of you who have been helping Linda through this time, and for those of you who have been helping me sort out some of the stuff with the dental practice. So my brother was an enigma. All of you everybody had a piece of him. Nobody knew the entire Michael Patrick Healy. I didn't even know until my sister Kathy told me that he was born without a middle name. It was Michael Healy. And later on, Patrick was added. It turned out that was one of the names that they had chosen for him. So I'm going to do this in two parts. First part is about his life as growing up, and parts of that life in which I think shaped him. And then the second half will just be the stories. Because Michael and I had some stories. So I am the youngest, besides being the better looking. I wore a tie for you. I don't wear ties, but I wore a Michael tie. This is a Michael tie for sure. Not one of his, but one that would definitely fit in with his closet 1,000 times. So as I go through this, just for a moment, let's dry our tears, suspend our sorrow, and set aside our anger if we have that as well. Michael's born to John Francis and Claire Louise. And my dad had just gotten out of college. No, he was in college, just got out of the Navy. He's working his way through college and a job, and marries my mom. They have a little baby. And so a nice stay-at-home mom. They didn't have two pennies to rub together. They were poor. He was an engineer just out of the Army. So we moved to Rhode Island, and then somewhere along the way, Kathy popped out. See, remember, I'm telling a story. I'm 9 years younger. Michael doesn't enter. I enter Michael's life, and my first recollection of him, he's already 14. So I actually had to go through the archives, police records, and whatnot. One thing about Michael, though, he didn't speak until he was almost 4 years old. Did you know that? Michael was a little awkward. But my parents were really worried because he spent several months walking around the house as Howdy Doody.
It's true.
It's true. He walked around, and he didn't do this. This wasn't like for a day or two. Like, he did it for a while. Michael was committed to anything he did, and that was one of them. So in Rhode Island, they were playing badminton in the backyard, baseball on the side of the house. Kathy and Michael had a job one summer, a business one summer, taking candy bars and putting them on the end of sticks, freezing them, and then selling them to the neighbors. And then reinvesting in more inventory. So
We never saw the profits.
So that again would be a trade of Michael's. If there was no money to be made off the deal, Michael would do it. I don't know what it is about you dentists, but you put dollar signs in front of numbers, and you guys, you go off. So the life in Rhode Island was nice. He was actually the youngest Eagle Scout in the state of Rhode Island. There was nothing to do. We lived in Westerly, where Taylor Swift now has her summer home. But it was a seaside community. Everybody went home Labor Day. They came back Memorial Day. And in between, there was nothing to do. And Michael actually completed all the badges. I think he was like 12. He completed his Eagle Scout, and I think they made him wait. And they got it at 13 or 14, something like that. But one of the things he did is he built a kayak out of canvas. And I think Kathy said that she helped, and your hands were all blue.
Yeah, I think he took pride in just painting over my hands as I'm holding the canvas down.
But this kayak lasted forever.
It did.
And Mike Claude over here, a lifetime. You saw that kayak, the blue one that I think we sold underneath him at a. My mother had said, if you don't get out of my house, I'm going to sell it at the next garage sale. He didn't. She did. Sorry about that, Barb. He was really handy. We moved to Connecticut, and he went to LaSalle Academy. I think this is a life-altering time for him. My mother shared with me later on, he would get up early, take a train, and he'd go to school, and that train ride was not good for Michael. Michael was beaten up. He was, and I don't know who he shared that with, but I know that was a tough time for him. It was at that time that I think he developed some of the defense mechanisms that we later saw in life. But that was a tough time for him. But then we moved to Avon, Connecticut. His lifelong friend, Mike Klotz, sitting over here. Mike was a neighbor of ours, then happened to move to Atlanta years later. But Mike and Phil Atwood used to always hang out and have a good time. Now at that Connecticut home is when I really started to get to know Michael, because he would come home, because remember before he's at school all the time, and then during the summer he's gone. He was, we were all beach babies. It's what finally got him. We all love our dermatologist because we go there often. But during that time, Michael became very good with his hands, because we were always breaking things. We broke so many windows in the garage playing basketball, but Michael, I actually got pretty good at it too. He put, I think he did, or somebody did, put some bicycles through the wall of the garage. It might have been my mother who did it. And she got, my mother did it, paid my sister $50 to take the fall, and Michael repaired. And he got paid to repair. So, yeah, you can kind of tell what the Irish side in his family. But he was very good at doing that. One time he burnt a hole in the Formica using incense, and I've been told it really was incense, although I kind of doubted that story. And his solution was to put a plate over it. And then my parents came home, and then I learned that he knew how to replace Formica. He was pretty good. So then he went to UConn undergrad. You know, he tells these stories, and you know, and he was the only Irish Catholic president of Tau Epsilon Phi. Tau Epsilon Phi is a Jewish fraternity, and he was a member, and he was president, and he thought that was great. He says an Irish Catholic. I skipped over that. Michael was an altar boy. Besides an Eagle Scout, Michael was an altar boy. And we used to have some interesting talks about religion, but I know he believed. But you know, he like many people would take some issues with some things. He went to Case Western Reserve, and I think that's where he started meeting people with money. Our family has said that Michael is different than the three of us. We've talked about this. Like, is he adopted? He is very much. Some way we were very the same. Our sense of humor, or certain things, and in other ways we were very different. But at cases where he met somebody with a sports car, and his love of cars really started. Now, he had nice cars. Our family had the thing where a car gets handed down to each sibling. Each sibling had to buy it from the one ahead, kind of like a move up. And I got, my first car was a Mustang, a 67 Mustang, and that was originally Michael's. Nancy had a Firebird that was originally Michael's. I don't know, did you get a Tempest?
I didn't even get a hand-me-down.
So he had cool cars back then, but that's when he started racing. And then my parents had 3 kids in college, so they told him, if you want to continue this thing called dental school, you need to go find a way to pay for it, and he joined the Army. He told me the Army was like being in the 6th grade 3 years in a row. First year was interesting, the second year was somewhat monotonous, and the third year was downright boring. He used to get written up because he didn't wear the right kind of socks. That was his big thing. He wanted to be a rebel and not wear black socks and wear whatever he wanted to wear. And I know at one point, like, they really had it with him. He got in a car accident when he was in Fort Hood. He got a bus rammed into him and his friend and hurt his back. And he had that going with him for the rest of his life. But this is when I got to know, he gets out of the Army, he starts doing his residency at UConn. I'm in college. I have 2 choices to go home. One, I said we had no money. I was in upstate New York. I went home twice a year. I went home for Christmas and the end of the year. That's it. All the other time, I relied on my siblings. So Kathy lived in Danbury, and Kathy and Eric, who were just starting out, their family were kind enough, and if I needed to be fed, clothed, laundry done, a little TLC, I'd go to Kathy and Eric. If I wanted to have fun, I went to Michael. And so I would go visit Michael, and we would have relatively good fun, because neither one of us had any money at that point, so that wasn't as much fun. So then I come to Atlanta, graduate college, start with an accounting firm here in Atlanta. Gail, my wife, the future wife at the time, came down, and then Michael started his practice. And the great story was, my parents had rules, and one was, once you have a job and you've completed college, you are out of the house. There's no, and so the conversation was, when's your first paycheck? It was July 1st. Parents said, great, July 10th, you're out of the house. And so we were. On September 1st, my brother moved in. So I moved out, the last kid moves out, the first kid comes home. Parents weren't really happy about that. But he lived at home, but he didn't know anything. So Michael and I started, that's when we really started to get to know each other a lot better. There was one time, snow jam, it was like 81, 82. And he was living at my parents' house in Sandy Springs. I couldn't make it home to our apartment in Cobb County. So I show up, And there used to be a Mexican restaurant. It's not a strip club. But it was called Chi-Chi's. Chi-Chi's Mexican restaurant right at the corner of Brentwood Drive and Roswell Road. And we lived on Brentwood Drive. So Michael and I go up there just to see what's going on. It's snow jam. Find out they don't have any power and they're having a drink the bar party. So Michael and I stayed till about 3 in the morning when they had run out of ice. And Michael said, we got ice. Our house is right around the corner. And so Michael, always liking the good time, we brought 11 people strangers from a restaurant that we had just met right before, brought them in, and then the next morning Michael said, we might want to see if they stole it. So we did. We didn't find anything that they stole. I said my brother was an enigma because, first of all, he would have told you the World War II story about the enigma. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I ever tell you a time that the Nazis had this thing? Nobody has a full picture. So, half the stories Michael told were total bullshit. How many heard the story about my aunt being a spy? That's a true story. How many heard the story about Michael's football prowess? I heard him telling that story. Total bullshit. He had the Healy gene for athletics. But he does have, he was undefeated. Mike Klott and he were on the Avon High School football team. I think you played, though. Yes. Yeah, Michael played one set of downs on some blowout. Housatonic, we beat him like 52-0, and that's the only time my brother took the field. But he was a big kid, and he did enjoy it, and he did make friends, and he did consider himself part of that team. And he carried that championship with him forever. State champions. I was a center. Okay. But there were a lot. If you want to know, there were 2 people who were pretty good at calling bullshit on my brother. One is me, and the other is his friend Enzo, which I don't see here today. But Enzo is from Italy, and he said, "Oh, Mike, I mean, you're so full of shit." He was very generous. He was caring. He would, my sister, if all of you were wondering who wrote Pooh and the Poohettes, that's my sister Nancy, called her Pooh. But she used to write letters when he was in dental school, she would write letters. We used to write letters, kids. We didn't have to. And he'd write a letter, and the letter was, she always signed it to Tooth Fairy. So she'd write her brother a letter and sign it to Tooth Fairy. And upon graduation, he gave her a box, and he had made some jewelry out of it, like teeth and stuff. But it's very pretty, and she still has it. She has it to say. Another day, he found out she had just moved to Boston, and she was eating off paper plates. She showed up for dinner with dishes. Little acts of kindness. He did struggle in relationships, and I really think it might get back to some of those other days. But he was, everybody's not good at everything. He wasn't particularly good with money. He wasn't particularly good at reading the room. Those of you who worked with him and who work with him now will know that sometimes he says things you're like, where did that come from? But for all those things, he was a very caring person. He cared so much that one night, so I would see Michael in spurts. So when Michael moved to Atlanta, he had an apartment at Riverbend, the condos. We used to go down to Chattahoochee. He had these parties. We used to, and some of us here used to show up at our parties. He's got other friends here. But we used to have these great times. And one time, this is getting back to how I would see him. I'd see him, and then he met Carol, his first wife, fell in love, had 2 beautiful children, Paige and Brennan. And, and so he became a family man. So I hardly would see him. We'd see him, but not all the time. Then he got divorced, then we saw him all the time. And he'd come to our house for Christmas and Easter and just if he was hungry, and he'd call me up and go, "Hey, we need a bro night out." Okay. So one night we're on Cheshire Bridge Road, and it's about 11:30, and I thought I knew every seedy place on Cheshire Bridge Road, but yet he knew another. And so he said, "I want to bring you, have you ever been to this club?" I said, "No, I've never been to this club." So we go to the window, it's 11:30 at night, window opens up, and he goes, "It's going to be $25." I said, "All right." And the gentleman says, "You're here for the club?" He goes, "Yes." He goes, "Sir, when was the last time you were here?" He goes, "I was here about 9 months ago." And he said, "We changed our genre. We are now a gay club." And without missing a beat, the good little brother put my arm around him and I said, "Well, silly, that's why we're here." And he looked looked at me and he said, "You're an ass." There's another time, and we went to Las Vegas, and I learned out, and my brother was afraid of heights, and we went to the Hoover Dam, and they have that bridge. I wanted to take a picture of him and me with the dam behind us. I couldn't get him more than 5 feet out. He was holding on to that rail. But also on that trip, and those of us who knew would know Michael every once in a while would just fall asleep on you. So we were in Caesar's Palace at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we went off, and one of my buddies stayed behind. We went there for the Super Bowl, and to bet on the Super Bowl. And my buddy sends me a picture of Michael sleeping and says, "My babysitting rates are $5 an hour." And I said, "Sounds good." So Michael slept there for, and that gentleman actually sent a plant where he said, from the babysitter. Let's see. We'd go visit my father in Sarasota, and after a couple of days, hours, minutes, we would get bored. And one time, and we'd just say, "We're going out to buy toys for the kids." That was always we're gonna go buy souvenirs for the kids from Sarasota. So one time, he and we found a bar. We stayed at that bar maybe 5 hours. We came home, my father wasn't really happy with us and asked us where we'd been, and we said, "You know, we're out shopping." And he says, "Well, what were you buying? Glitter, because you have it all over you." He was a bad influence on me. The last thing I'll tell you, and I'll wrap it up, is Michael's terrible. So in these periods where he didn't have a woman in his life, he really sucked at some things. And one was remembering birthdays. My birthday's in the beginning of May. He always wished me happy birthday when I called him for his. He'd go, "Oh, you got a birthday." It's not true. Now that Linda, we started getting cards again. But our tradition, just to make it simple, was we'll just celebrate birthdays on the 4th of July. And Michael started running the Peachtree Road Race with it. And Michael really didn't have running attire. Michael's sports outfits all looked the same. They were a golf shirt, Bermuda shorts with a belt. He wore black socks, work socks, like dress socks, not Nike. They hadn't been invented yet. And then tennis shoes. And that's how we ran the Peachtree. And he really didn't train much either. So we would then do it the night before. We'd meet at a hotel downtown, and we'd have dinner, and the kids would be there, and we would drink excessively, eat lots of food, everything you need to do if you're going to get up at 5:30 in the morning. So we started celebrating our birthdays because you just couldn't remember them, and it worked. That worked really well for a long time. But then we were on the race, and back in the day, the Peachtree Road Race, Harrison's was a bar in Peachtree, and they would open up, and if you're running the race, you'd come in and get a free beer. And then Krispy Kreme was there with donuts. So I'd run the race. And we used to always meet at the medical tent because we figured there was one way we were going to show up there, you either on your own or not. And so that's where we met. And he used to always go into Harrison's, and he'd drink the beer, and he'd run with a camera. And I don't know where those videos are, but he has movies of him running the Peachtree and all that. He really he cared deeply about his children. He cared deeply about Paige and Brennan. I think that was the highlight of his life, having children. He loved children. He loved his profession. I didn't talk a lot about dentistry because a lot of you are here. He was really good at his job. I give him a lot of credit for that. And he loved it. And he loved the charity. The things that he did, he really poured his life into it. But the other side of him was that he was a very sensitive person. Very sensitive. And had a strong feeling that if he was wronged in some way, that was something that it'd take him a while to let go of. And I talked to him a lot about that in the last 2 years. And he had his reasons, but this is the one thing I would take away from this. His biggest challenge was time. And he did not live a full life. He fell short. He fell far short of what he wanted. His vision was to be on a boat with Linda, sailing the Caribbean. I was looking forward to those days about crazy people get arrested in Bermuda and have to look up to see if it was them. But he fell short of that. And there's nobody more surprised to be here than him. I can say that because he always had a 5-year plan. He was stuck in year 1 of that 5-year plan. Never quite got to year 5. But he believed, and going back to the relationships, he believed he had time. He had time for everything. And that's what he ran out of. No fault of his own. Thanks. There's never been a cue to get off the stage. So, time is up. He's not even kicking me yet. So, all right, I'll let you decide. Any of you ever been to a Billy Joel concert? He kind of lets you decide what song you're going to hear. You have no choice. I don't even know the song names. So we can end with Monty Python, or we could end with a sailor. I mean, we have a choice. We can talk about sailing and what we say to sailors as they go over the bar, as they say. Or we could just read from Monty Python. What's the crowd want? You feel more Monty Python?
Like to,
I've word in here forever. So this happened. Gail knows. Gail knows I've been struggling with this. Had a couple weeks. Really struggled. And I travel a lot. And so I always have a portable speaker with me. I play music in my room. And we're getting ready to come here, and then Monty Python's, Look at the Bright Side of Life comes on. And I thought, that's good. So I'm going to sing the whole song. Then I'm doing Alice's Restaurant, and I'll do I never heard my brother play the guitar. I don't know why a guitar up here. I never heard the guy play guitar since. Never. Mike Klopp, lifelong friend. Never.
Every Saturday after lessons.
You say lessons?
Every Saturday for years.
Okay.
See,
Apparently
there. Something more about
now
your brother.
Kathy has music awards in her case. Michael will have no. He has no singing voice. He didn't go anywhere. So just the last 2 verses. And here it is. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your sin. Give the audience a grin. Enjoy it. It's your last chance. Anyhow, it's always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of death, actually. Just before you take your terminal breath. Life's a piece of shit when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's a joke. It's true. You'll see it's all a show. Keep them laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. I'll leave you with one little story and then I'll tap out. So the last laugh was on Michael. Chris Stallworth and I were headed off to spring training. And we both got calls from Michael. So Chris is in the car. We decided to play a little joke on the guy. And so Chris tells Michael he's going to some Rotary convention. He's staying at the convention hall in Orlando. You're hearing this for the first time. We had a lot of fun with this. So told him that he's going to some convention. Later on, we're sitting at the bar. I call Michael. Hey, where are you? Oh, I'm in Orlando. Yo, so is Chris. Really, where is he? He's at the convention center. I'm at the convention center too. Really? Yeah. He's at the bar. I'm at the bar. Hold on. And so he patches Chris in. Got you there? Hey, the 2 of you are at the same bar. And so we tell the story of the 2 of you, and like, Jack, great. We're sitting next to each other. And so he's living it up, and he's like, oh, you didn't know you were at the bar. I didn't introduce you to him. So he's doing that. The next morning, I'm feeling guilty. I go to Chris. Oh, gotta tell him. He goes, no, this is more fun. He goes, this is going to last a while. I eventually would have told him. But when I got bored, and this happened when he was in the hospital, I said, remember the time I went to Orlando and you called me? Yeah, and you didn't know Chris was there. Sorry, brother, that was a gag on you. Again, thank you everybody for coming, and keep Linda and Kathy and Nancy in your prayers. Thank you.